Hey folks, welcome to Market Technical Analysis by InTheMoneyStocks.com for November 14th, 2007. Well, once again, it was a peculiar day. Most of the day was spent in a very tight range until the end of the day where we saw a pretty steep sell-off. And that was very interesting to note because that's something we've seen relatively new on late day. Instead of late day rallies, we're seeing these late day sell-offs. And what you would note, we hit 2 points in yesterday's video right on. Number one, yesterday on the monster rally, and by all means it was a tremendous rally, we said take a look at Asia tonight. We think the market will gap up. This is what we said in the chat room as well. Expect the market to gap up today or the next day, and based off Asia having a monster rally on the U.S. rally. And then we said after that, who knows? We said it's very likely we see another hard sell or a flat market or so forth. Well, basically, we saw that gap up this morning. We had PPI numbers coming out at 8:30, which basically showed no inflation, and we saw a monster rally and a gap up, I should say. We saw the gap up here, and look at the gap up here on the NASDAQ. It was basically a 22, 23-point gap up here from yesterday's close on that monster rally yesterday, and that's what we talked about expecting yesterday. We also said it's very likely that some of these Asian stocks, Chinese stocks, will run because Asia should be up pretty sizably, and that did happen as well. So we were right on those. What we also had talked about was having that late sell-off again after that gap up, which we said was very possible. And you can see right from the opening bell, we saw the NASDAQ start to sell. And just to go over a few odds and ends here, we saw the NASDAQ closing down about 29 points or 1.1%, while the Dow closed down about 83 points or 0.62%, and the S&P 500 closing down almost 11 points or 0.72% percent lower. Okay, so the NASDAQ again led it on the downside. Yesterday it led it on the upside, so we should keep that in mind as well. But today on the sell-off, the NASDAQ led percentage-wise loser. Okay, now again, you guys see the angles here, and I'm going to get out my trend tools so we can all go over a few odds and ends. But here's where we closed yesterday. Here's the gap up, and right from the open we started to sell. All right, and the market basically came back to the flat line. We actually filled the gap here, and if you want to go into a little more of a technical nature of this market here, you guys can see, notice how here you had a consolidation period. And that's because you have at the gap window, when you fill the gap here, you have a lot of support. So you have this consolidation here. In addition, you also have the 20 moving average. So there's two areas there why you're going to see a pause or a bounce in the market. And we saw a pause here, as you can see, a sideways trading action for about an hour, well, 30 to 40 minutes probably. And then that's when we broke down here early on. And you can see a 3-bar sell. And what do we come across right here? But we see a bottoming tail formation with a close in the upper areas of that candle. You look for a break or close on a candle above that point. All right, above the top of that candle, which happened right here, which gave the ensuing rally. All right, got us back above the 20 moving average. And then we just traded in this sideways motion for, I don't know, it was, for a little while anyways. But I wanted to point out something here. In addition, another point on this chart, and I can show you this on the ES, probably a little easier to see on the ES, but note this pattern. Again, we saw an M and an A pattern, okay? And we know by now, or everyone should know, anyone that knows technical analysis, or at least technical points here, is that the MA pattern is a bearish pattern, a breakdown pattern, and that's what we got. Late in the day, major breakdown there. All right, you had a little pause here, and then another move down. But all in all, a nice MA pattern there signaling a breakdown in that market. Overall, very steep selling into the close, and you guys can see that here again. And yes, we did bounce. We did, get a little bottoming tail that last candle of the day where we bounced, which was needed after this 3-bar surge. When you have 3 bars, you generally get a bounce, and that's what we saw here, a bounce into the close. Now, let's look at the ES chart. And first I want to show the NASDAQ on the daily because that's very interesting. Here you have the M pattern we pointed out yesterday. The M pattern is very significant again. Now, you had a bounce here off the 200, and that was obvious. I mean, you have 2 moving averages, which really didn't cause a stoppage in the market or a bounce. Therefore, you got to assume that the 200, which is the Goliath of moving averages, you're going to get a bounce off that. That's what we got yesterday, and we even got the gap up today. Okay, but we did close lower, which means you got to close here, and you got to close yesterday here. So you really didn't get a confirmation on the bounce up here, which is a little worrisome to me. All right, if we had seen a close upward above the high from yesterday, I would have said, okay, we're in a near-term bounce area. Look for maybe a move up to this 50 moving average right here. But because we didn't see that, now I'm beginning to think we might have a little downside. However, it's always important to realize here that options expiration is this week, this Friday. In addition, you have the holiday next Thursday, Thanksgiving. Now that's going to cause for light trading next week. In fact, I think Thursday's definitely closed. I think Wednesday's open, but Friday is a half day, closes at 1 o'clock. Anyways, long story short, that's going to be a lot of light volume next week. So even though we don't see confirmation here, it's very possible we trade sideways, maybe up a little bit, but it's staying in this range, forming that A. Now we want to keep close watch on this A pattern, because should we get up to this area, we can look for a possible short. Though if it gets above by a little bit, we cover, obviously, and moved out for a tiny loss. However, on the downside, if you get there and you get a nice move down here, then you can look for an A pattern to form and a breakdown, which could take us somewhere in this realm. And again, I talked about this area down here as being a possible move on the markets should we complete that A, which would be a breakdown below the 200 moving average. And I'll have to look again as we get closer. I'll look at exact points to expect that market to go to. But in any case, that's what it could look like, and we are following this pattern very closely to monitor the A formation here on the MA. Okay? Without a doubt, very bearish that we sold off late in the day today and we could not stay positive, especially after a PPI number that was not horrible for the markets. It did not show inflation, which is very interesting. Now, we saw oil bounce today, and we had talked in the chat room yesterday. I don't know if I talked in the video yesterday how oil had moved down and bounced off the 20 moving average. It actually had been below yesterday on that major sell-off, but by the close it moved back above or on that 20 moving average. Whenever you see a chart pattern like that, in general, and again, it's never 100%, but in general, you get a bounce the next day. That's what we saw today. So you had a rollover, bounce off the 20, and a bounce up today. Very nice little bounce there. Okay. In addition, you had the GLD. Same thing. You had a pierce of that moving average, a close above, and a bounce today up $1.16 in the GLD, the gold street tracks here. All right. All in all, a very interesting day. The late day sell-off again bothers me quite a bit. I'm going to look at the ES pattern here quickly, and we're going to look at the intraday. And it's a little sloppier on this, believe it or not, even though you have more accentuated moves. But what I just want to point out here is on the ES today, we had a definite channel formation here. And I just want to point this out here. Basically, give or take somewhere in here. But you see, it kept on going up and down, hitting here, moving up to the top. The point here was, what I want to show is that you get a close or a break of this channel. And a close is really the safest way to do it because you don't want to jump out on a limb assuming. But at this point, yeah, and then you see the move down. So again, you create a channel here, a break down or break up, and you get the close outside of that. Chances are there will be accentuated moves, accelerated moves to the downside or the upside, whichever it broke out to. All right? And again, this is going back to the daily market here. You see the market opens right up here on the gap up. Right over here you have the 8:30 news of the PPI sending the market up here. You have a nice little sliding up pattern here, and you get a move down here, and then it basically consolidates for the rest of the day until the close where we saw the dramatic sell-off. Now, just to point out a few things, we did talk about some Chinese stocks that had moved up dramatically today. In addition, we also saw some after-hours activity today on some of these Chinese stocks, and they are up big, I must admit. So I'm going to just quickly point out some ones to watch for tomorrow. And this is by no means should you be trading these. These are going to gap up huge at this point. TSTC, which is a little wireless telecommunications player in China here, trading up about $1.50 after hours here, 781 by 799 after closing up 4 cents for the day at 635. In addition, FUQI, which was an IPO not long ago, and you see here it's trading up over $1, 878 by 889 when it closed at 771. So again, you're seeing some monster earnings from some of these players here. Another one was GSI, which is a steel company, reported nice earnings, and it's up about 50, 60, 70 cents after hours here. So this should be, now these are all small enough to the point where it's not going to really affect the market in great deal. I just want to point these out because it could cause some movements in some of these sectors tomorrow, maybe the China sector or so forth. You get some momentum, some sympathy plays in the chat room. One thing I do want to point out is AMAT. I believe AMAT had earnings. Okay, AMAT did have earnings after the bell here, and not a whole lot going on with that stock. I'll show you it right here. and it's basically trading where it closed. It closed up 20 cents for the day. It's trading up a penny or two here after hours. They did report a reduction in profit, I believe a 6% drop in quarterly profit or something like that, but it's all what the market expects, and apparently the market has expected essentially what they got, at least where it's trading now. Now, if we sell off hard again tomorrow, they could sell off hard with it as people get worried about that profit number. All right. All in all, quite something here, folks. Without a doubt, the market is giving us some interesting angles, very interesting angles, and it's going to be interesting to see where the market goes. These late-day sell-offs need to be watched. It could accelerate into panic at some point. Although, again, with the Options X this Friday, don't expect any, expect volatility, major volatility. Options X, every Friday, Options X, which is the third Friday of every month, has always been a dramatic week for the markets over the past 3 months. So be aware of that, folks. Have a wonderful day. We'll be back in touch tomorrow with another video. Watch the markets here. It's going to be fun. Take care.